Alright, so this is the Hampton Bay Hawkins ceiling fan. One of the reasons we picked this for the particular application we're doing is because it can mount directly flush on a ceiling. This doesn't go on a post. So in a room with a relatively low ceiling where you still want to have a ceiling fan, a combination with your light fixture, this is going to work. It only sticks down about a foot. So it's 44-inch Hampton Bay Hawkins ceiling fan, available at Home Depot, a little under $100. We'll show how this goes on. One of the things I noticed over the course of doing the installation on this is that it's pretty decent for a one-man installation, as long as you're not having to get up on a high ladder. Most of the ceiling fans I deal with, you need a second hand on a few parts. This one has some pretty unique features that cause it to where it can be a one-man installation. 2 hours, you know. Somebody who's really accustomed to doing these will get it done in an hour. I'm really going to want 2 hours start to finish. Alright, so I won't show the unpacking sequence, but I'll show the initial installation. Basically, this all works off of a plate. So you get the plate bolted onto your ceiling fixture. You get the wires coming down the middle. We'll be hooking those up. The very first one I'm going to hook up is the ground wire, and then we're going to go from there with the instructions. Here's what I really like. There's a hook on the edge of the mounting plate. You unpack your fan motor, you hang it on the hook, and that allows you to do all of your electrical work without having to hold this thing up with one hand or have a second person holding one end of it up. So it makes this a one-man installation. Not a very expensive setup either. These things are under $100, and it is much easier to deal with than some of the higher end combination light and fans out there. And the stuff inside is basically the same stuff. Alright, so with the wiring done, and you have 4 posts that are going to take these nuts and washers here, here, and here, and they correspond to the holes on this bracket. So what we're going to do is make sure I've gotten all the packing material off of this. We'll get it up there, we'll get them hand tight, and then I've got to grab a wrench to tighten those things down. Alright, so with our stuff tightened down, we also want to double check to make sure that, you know, none of our wires are getting in the way of anything. I don't really like the way they're kind of dangling close to the motor. So I decided to power this up and see if they rub on anything and make sure everything's kind of smooth. So you can test that ahead of time. And I'm going to stuff some of those wires up in there a little better, get the rest of this put together. Alright, so next we have a trim ring, and that's this thing here, nice stainless steel. You'll see the locking points on there. That's what corresponds to those little tabs that go around this whole thing. So we'll just set that up there and kind of put it on and lock it in place. So with that put on, and we want to make sure we're not pinching or trapping any of the wires or cables or moving parts when we do that, and so on to the next stage. And this is a 5-bladed fan. There's several of these to put together, and this is where you have the option of going to wood grain or the white. I'm going to go with the white facing down, so when we put the blade holders on, it's going to be with the white facing down just to kind of match the color scheme of this room. So this is our piece right here, and of course I've got the nuts here. So what's going to happen is this kind of goes on to here. We're going to flip that over and get the not the nuts but the screws in. And they come with these little buffers on them. I use an impact driver, but you don't want to be knocking them in so that it strips it. Just very light pressure to put these in. Again, very light pressure with the power tool. Notice I'm not really wanting to activate the impact on that. A lot of these power tools are trigger controlled, so it controls how much power is going on to that. But you don't want to over crank it. A lot of plastic, it can crack if you over torque it. So you can see there's a tab up there, there's a tab here. I've backed those off a little bit. Hopefully we're going to come into focus here. And I backed those off a little bit so that when I stick it up on that tab, there's a starting point for that, but it's really tricky. So we're going to get this one on there, but you stick it up on that tab, kind of even it out, get both of those started. Don't crank one down all the way before you start the other one. Kind of go back and forth like you're doing wheel lug nuts or something like that. And there we are running. Got all the blades installed. Turns out, I think this paper piece doesn't come off. I'd rather have it off, but it really doesn't come off that easily. And then the next is to put the light itself on. And I'm just kind of checking this for balance. It's got a little wobble to it, but according to the instructions, that's okay. So there is a cap that comes with this, so you can just cap that off if you want this to be a fan without a light. But we're going to go ahead and put the light on. Okay, with the light plugged in, we're noticing we've got some screws. Now we're going to undo these, set that up in there, and then put them back in, but through these holes. When we do that, we want to make sure that we're not pinching off or cutting any of the pre-existing wires or connections. So that's where it gets a little tricky. Going to take me both hands to do that. Okay, so you're going to notice two holes in the glass light bowl here. One of which is for the center post for the light attachment. The other is for the light switch chain to go through. So those are the two things we're looking at. The light switch chain is going to fall through that, and the post for the nuts. So that gets all put together. I'll show you how that goes. So the way this is going to come down is one of those holes goes right through the middle for the chain activator. The other one is going to come through for the chain activator for the actual fan. So one's going to be for the light, one's for the fan, and we'll show how that goes together. But there's a point where this feeds through a slot up here and then goes through a hole here, and then our glass bowl goes up on there, and that is going to get held in by the first nut. And once that's all held on, and we're going to put the next one on. We'll show that here in a second, because what's going to happen is well, we'll show you. Okay, so as we get these on, you'll see how these holes go. Then we've got this trim piece, which is going to go on. And then we've got to make sure that these kind of line up and go through. And then after that's on, I've got another nut that holds that plate on. So it's going to stick down a little bit decorative, and we'll get that together. Alright, so with all of these on, when you crank this into this, that's not going killer tight. We're not trying to crack that glass. We're just trying to get it up there nice and firm, little rubber feet on there. Once this is all together, we've got little extenders that we're going to put on these things. And here we are, all done. So you power up, and we're all good. And so I've got these running off a single power. What's going to happen is you can turn them on and off individually. I'm getting a little bearing noise out of this, which is mildly irritating, but not the end of the world. And hopefully, hopefully the bearing noise goes away as it breaks in or something. But everything else seems pretty good.